Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. Hello, this is David Gouthro with Discover Fresh Perspectives. This is Season 2. I can't believe we're in Season 2 already. And today I have the pleasure of having a conversation with David McCann. Welcome, David.
Good morning, David. Sorry it took me so long to respond to your invitation a year ago.
You know what? I'm just thrilled that you're here today. So, David, what I ask people for in these conversations about what's something you're passionate about, and you specifically said, well, random acts of kindness and some of the value that can provide to the world. So there may be some people listening that weren't around when the first books on random acts of kindness came out. So maybe just give a brief description of it. What's a generic random act of kindness?
They can be as simple as opening the door for somebody, holding an elevator for somebody coming in, opening the door for a taxi for somebody, or cooking a meal for your partner that's just come in from working a 12-hour day. They can be reaching out and touching somebody else's life in a way that was somewhat unexpected. And you're in McDonald's in the morning, and as you're walking in, you see somebody sitting on the curb, they're homeless. They're just sitting there nodded out, and you buy a little meal for them, and you just give them a cup of coffee and a glass of orange juice and a McDonald's meal. It costs you $8-10, and you just wander out and you just place it and wish them a happy day. So, I think that we are each responsible for helping make gentle our world, and we so often have the opportunity and we don't take advantage of it.
So I want to distinguish between planned acts of kindness and random acts of kindness. And so what's the payback? What's the benefit both to the person who's, first of all, the benefit of a random act of kindness, and then what's the benefit to the person that's delivering that act of kindness and on the person who's on the receiving end of a random act of kindness?
I think you give it without any expectation of getting anything back. But this morning, I was in the McDonald's. There was a homeless person on the street, as I mentioned previously. I bought him a meal, and he was literally just nodded right out. And I just touched him on the shoulder and said, "Here's a meal." And he looked at me, and the smile on his face was incredible payback. Don't know him from Adam. We'll probably never see him again. But that warm, fuzzy feeling is, you can't buy it. It's touching another human's life in some way. I mean, some of them are bigger. You know, you make a big donation, write a check to somebody, and you never see where the money goes. That's another one. But I mean, giving back. I mean, many of us are really incredibly blessed, and we think that it's hard to do. It's not. It's really, really simple to do. We just have to make it part of our daily lives. I don't think a day goes by that I don't do one or two acts of kindness.
So, I'm just, I wander all over the place here because it's my podcast.
You're allowed.
And so, my wife and I were out for dinner with our daughter, who's getting married in September, by the way, and her partner.
So you'll be a grandpa soon.
Okay, well, let's just take one step at a time, David. But they live in Gastown, and we were at a restaurant in Gastown, and we couldn't eat our entire meal, so we asked if they could box it up. And as we were heading back to our car, I said, there's a very good chance that we're going to find someone that needs this meal more than we do. We're not going to get it back to the car. Let's just look for those opportunities. So it was just one of those. Why not? And in Gastown, there's so many people that could use that. So. Yeah, it was just really good to be thinking about that. David, I'm just thinking, we should probably let people know a little bit about you and who you are and all that kind of stuff. So, we met many years ago, but maybe you could tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself and what you've done in your life and how you've come to this incredible, willingness and desire to do these random acts of kindness. So, what's the backstory of David McCann?
Well, I was born in Ottawa, raised in Ontario, spent a little bit of time living in the United States. And in the late 1980s, and I basically lived a fairly solitary existence, a farm at the end of a dead-end road, or I'd have a house in downtown Toronto and a couple thousand square feet and live there by myself. But in the late 1980s, Mount Cashel blew up. And I realized that when I was a kid, when I was 12 years old, I went to a school run by the Christian Brothers. And there was rampant abuse in that school. And I called a reporter from the Toronto Star, and it blew up. The story literally just blew up. It turned out to be one of the largest police investigations, either the second or the first largest police investigation in Ontario history. And it led to over 100 people being charged. 1,600 victims came forward.
So, David, I'm going to stop you for just a sec because I want to hear every word that you're saying, and you may be speaking a little bit quicker than people can listen. So maybe just slow down just a little bit. I want to catch every word.
Okay. Anyways, I became the chairman of the victims group, and over time, we started to get calls from lawyers and saying, there's a massive lawsuit here and everything else. And in the interim that it had come up, we were having one person a month, on average, commit suicide facing the memories of the past. And I realized that if we went down I'd worked for justice officials in the United States and Canada before, and I realized that if we went down that road, that what we were going to do is we were going to wind up with just a huge number of deaths. We'd had over 30 of them, and it's devastating to hear. So I approached a lawyer in Toronto, the name of Roger Tucker in Ottawa, not Toronto. And he said, look, why don't we try mediation? And we eventually reached one of the first institutional reconciliation agreements in Canada, and it became a template used around the world. But in the years that I was the chair, and I also testified, the person who abused me got a number of years in a federal penitentiary. And I realized that if you really want to heal the wounds of the past, you have to work with people to try and reconcile and heal. And I don't have any regrets. I read the newspaper yesterday, and I just understand that Mount Cashel, who came out before us, has reached a final settlement in terms of we closed the files almost 30 years ago.
Wow.
We put people through the reconciliation process. They got counseling, they got educational benefits, medical, dental, tattoo removal, and they got money, some of them. And people were able to move on with their lives. But for me, at the time, I was living at the end in the country. I had a little farm. I was under 24-hour police protection because I was getting a lot of threats for taking on the church and the government, trying to destroy the world. And I said, if you'd sat at the reconciliation table, you'd realize that's not what I was at. Even with the person who abused me, when it came time for sentencing, I said, don't send him to a penitentiary. He's in his 80s. Well, it's going to cost the taxpayer a huge amount of money. Why not put him in a monastery, keep him under, you can't leave 24 hours a day, put a bracelet on his ankle, let the church help pay for part of the cost of doing it. They unfortunately the judge didn't listen to me. I don't believe in vengeance. And I think the criminal justice system in many ways is about that. And I think the civil court system is about vengeance and revenge. And I look back at it, and I'm still in contact with some of the former survivors. They were able to close that chapter on their lives and move on. But my sister called me up and she said, look, David, you're not going to do yourself any good staying in Ontario. I found this little gallery on Granville Island. I didn't have a clue what Granville Island was. And she said, we should buy it. Do you have any money? And I don't know, she must have a spy in my bank because she nailed almost to the dollar how much money I had. I bought this lovely little gallery called Creek House Gallery, and it just expanded it. When I came out here, I sat down with my sister one weekend, and she said, look, you have an opportunity now to change your life forever. And I met some incredible people. You were one of them. You were one of the tenants in the building when I was. And that gallery opened a whole new avenue. Granville Island is an incredible people place. I love it. And it wasn't long before people started coming in the door and saying, we're this community group or that community group, and can you help us? We've got a silent auction or live auction. We want to recognize somebody who's contributed. And I met those people, and it opened up another avenue to me. I have binders, 3-inch binders full of thank you letters. I got 5 or 6 of them. I finally quit collecting them in 2015 because I just realized it's nice to sit down and go through them and realize the groups are there. But what I discovered, I gave a TED talk called Reconciliation in Rome, in 2017. And it talked about me going to Rome and meeting the Pope and talking and asking the church to really embrace the idea of reconciliation and healing. I think they have a ways to go, but I think they're starting down that path. And at the very end of it, the interviewer asked me, he said, if you had to sum it all up, what do you think you could say in one sentence? And I said, I think what I have learned is that by helping others, you heal yourself.
Mm.
And and to see the looks on, I'm very blessed. Many of the times that I do things, I get to see the end results. I mean, I take donuts and have been for years. At the end of the day, from Lee's Donuts, they have some left over. I take them to the shelters, and you see the people that that actually get them. I remember one day I took a whole bunch. They were having a birthday party for somebody. Like 70 people in this old warehouse with just wood floors. People put a little roll on the floor and they sleep there. And they had one cupcake that they were going to divide into 4 or 5 pieces, celebrating somebody's birthday. And I walked in with like 250 donuts, and and the cheers that went up through that ratty old building with these people who have nothing, it just warms your heart, and you realize it's worth doing. And a lot of times you do stuff and you never know what the end result is. But I've been blessed. I occasionally get to see it, and it makes a huge difference. And the smallest thing you do, I mean, what does it take? 25 minutes to take a bunch of bags of donuts, or boxes of donuts, and drop them out somewhere. But the difference it makes in people's lives are huge.
So David, you at the beginning talked about a number of different examples of random acts of kindness, like holding a door for someone. We immediately, see the result, and a bunch of other ones. But your random acts of kindness are on a scale like nothing I've ever heard or experienced before. So, don't want to diminish the little ones, because those little ones, those millions add up to,
Yeah.
to in such a big way. But could you just talk about some of the big things? Like, I don't think you get enough credit in general for the things that you do, other than the people that you do them for. And I just like people to hear about the way that you think about things and what you do and what impact it has.
I'll give you 3 examples. And 2 of them are in Mexico. I've been going to Puerto Vallarta since 1968. We had a magic bus when I was in university, an old school bus, painted with flowers and everything. And we drove down, and we actually wound up in Acapulco, but we stopped in PV. So it was a little sleepy fishing village. It's not that anymore. But a friend of mine owns a hotel there. And one day I was down, and I'd done taking some artwork from my gallery down to galas and whatnot. But he said, look, I understand I was down visiting. He said, I understand you're working on the Vancouver AIDS Memorial. You're on the board of directors. And he said, do you know any of the drug companies? The Mexican government has built a new AIDS clinic adjacent to the hospital, separate. They didn't want anybody walking in the hospital. And so he took me out and showed me. It's a concrete building. It's concrete block walls inside. They've got posters on there that would scare Satan. I mean, it was just awful, horrible place. I thought, who wants to come in here and get healed? So I said, look, I'm going to be coming back in a couple of months. I'll bring a whole bunch of art for the walls. I'll pay you for some paint. Paint the walls white or beige. And he said, well, do you know any of the drug companies? And I said, yes. They've been making some definite donations to help build the Memorial Landings Bay. And he said, can you ask them if they would send us some drugs? Because the Mexican government has budgeted to build the clinic, but they've given us no money for medications to treat people. And so I talked to a couple of them, and WestJet very kindly shipped all the stuff for free. I also talked to some friends of mine. They'd set aside a room for a dental clinic, but no money for equipment. And a number of my dentist friends and orthodontists and whatnot had to have the latest gadget. So they'd replace the stuff in their office, and they'd take all the stuff, put it in a box, and they'd stick it in their garage in their basement. So I shipped WestJet again, very graciously, shipped a couple of pallet loads of dental equipment down, including chairs. And then 4 or 5 months later, I went down, and without thinking about the process of going through international borders, I had a bunch of art and a bunch more dental stuff and some medical equipment. When I got to PV, I realized, and WestJet again shipped all that stuff extra for free. One of my favorite airlines. And I scooted right through immigration. And then I got there and thought, there's customs. I had 6 carts full of stuff. And I got to that little tree, you push the button. If it's green, you go right through. If it's red, you get, and I luckily pushed the button and I got green button and said, and I had 5 guys pushing carts behind me, 5 Mexican guys, and helping me. And I just about out the door, and the guy goes, Senor. And I go, uh-oh. And he said, what is all this stuff? It's not the normal tourist with 2 big bags full of stuff. It's like boxes and boxes. And they started opening it. He takes me in his office. And he says, what is this? You've got medical, you've got dental equipment, you've got a huge amount of art. What are you doing? And I said, it's for the regional hospital. And he says, what? What regional hospital? I said, one here in BV. It's for the HIV/AIDS clinic. And he looks at me instantly and he goes, Senor David? I said, yes. And he says, just a minute. He opens the door and he goes, Manuel Hector. And the Spanish so fast I can't understand a word he's saying. And they start packing it up. And he closes the door. He's got tears in his eyes. He says, my sister, when the drugs came 6 months ago, my sister was one of the first people to get them. She was pregnant. Her baby was born a week ago, HIV free. All it took me was 2 phone calls to get the drug companies to Merck, and I forget which the other one was, to donate the art, and they WestJet shipped it for free. That little girl, I met him in a farmer's market a couple of years later. And it's busy. It's Saturday morning. There's several thousand people around. And suddenly someone yells, Senor David, Senor David. And everybody just looks, And he runs up and he gives me a great big hug. And he's speaking a mile a minute in Spanish. I can't understand a word he's saying again. And suddenly he suddenly realizes I'm not understanding what he's saying. He says, I want you to meet my sister. And he turns around and there's this woman standing there. And suddenly from behind her comes this little girl. They've called her Maria Davida.
Huh.
And he said, this is the life you saved. 2 phone calls. And I'm sure there are hundreds of other stories from that clinic. The clinic has got beautiful art on the wall. They've used a lot of it for fundraising purposes. I don't see any of it. Another time in Mexico, I was talking to a lovely lady. She asked for some artwork for fundraising, and I gave it to her. She unfortunately passed away from cancer a few years ago. But in her memory, I decided I would put an 8-year program in place where I'd send money to Mexico. I talked to a lot of people down there that I know, particularly Bob Price at the Vallarta Botanical Gardens. They're running a program where they are taking money and renovating schools in small fishing villages and small farming communities south of PV. They're providing scholarships. They put fridges and stoves and microwaves, and desks and tables and chairs. They'll do the roof. They put windows and doors in, screens, air conditioner. I spoke to a teacher one day last year, and she said, you've made a huge difference. She said, the kids are in class 20 or 30% more time. I said, well, that's not me. She said, of course. She said, the roof doesn't leak anymore. When it's really hot, we turn the air conditioner on, we close the windows and doors. And so it's cool inside. It's not 35, 40 degrees outside. She said, the kitchen equipment you bought, the mothers and aunts and grandmothers and daughters are now starting to cook meals for the kids. The farmers and the fishermen are giving us fresh produce and fresh protein. And she said, so we now have a meals program. And she said, you only buy the supplies. So the men in the village do all the work. And she said, you've created a sense of community spirit that we've never had before. Something we never dreamed of, but it just happened organically. And I've gone down a couple of times when they've been giving out the scholarships to the kids. And it's not just for academic. You want people, if you've got musical talents or you huge community involvement. And the smiles on those kids, it's just you can't say it. But I've also, the lady that took over when the one lady died, she got cancer again. It's the second time it's happened. She was running the programs in Boca de Tomatlan and Comixto. She got cancer. One of her friends decided to do a fundraiser to try and get treatments. It wasn't successful, unfortunately, but she got hundreds of people to donate through a Facebook GoFundMe page that bought drugs and made her passing so much easier. And one person, what comes out of the whole thing is one person can make a difference. Everybody in Mexico that's working on my project does it for free. And they've got expats that are living down there. to start teaching English or Spanish or French or Italian or French to the students. And so they have two or three languages. There was one kid that they taught to speak English. He was working at a hotel as a gardener. There was a kid on a slow water slide that slid down, banged his head. Of course, there's water everywhere. You put a teaspoon of blood in a puddle of water and it looks like someone's bleeding to death. His parents were in having lunch. Kids was having fun. Well, the gardener ran out, got a couple towels, moved in. The hotel manager runs out. I mean, there's a huge commotion. Starts talking to him in English, thanks him for doing it, and says, "We'd like to compliment you for your dinner tonight in the restaurant as a thank you for doing this." He says, no. He said, "I work for you. I'm your gardener," in English. And the manager looks at him and goes, "You speak perfect English. What are you doing working?" They gave him a job as a night clerk. Oh, sorry, David.
That's okay.
And then they discovered he's really got knack for languages. Very bright kid. He was a street kid. And they promoted him. He's now running a major hotel for that chain on the east coast of Mexico. And I can't remember the name. It's the big city on the peninsula. And only because two women taught him English in his spare time. And you don't know where the ripples from that stone you throw in the pond. And I've just found so many people volunteer. I'm doing a fundraiser on Granville Island, the 18th to the 21st. We're giving away a free art print to anybody who makes a donation. I'm trying to raise $1 million to feed hungry kids in school systems because we know the kids go to school, can't learn. They can't take full advantage of that educational opportunity.
That's here in BC, David?
That's here on Granville Island at Ocean Artworks.
No, but I mean the schools that are being supported?
Oh, we've shipped up as far away as New Brunswick and Newfoundland. Up and down the coast, Smithers, Terrace, 4 school boards here in the Lower Mainland. And I've been asking for the last week for volunteers. I got 17 people that have come forward in 5 days and said, yeah, we'll do a shift. We'll do a 4-hour shift, 4.5-hour shift. And I did it in the public market after September 11th. In 4 days, I raised $55,000. And I just look at it and go, that money then went to a fire hall in New York where they lost a number of people when 7/11 happened. And 3 or 4 years later, I'm standing in my gallery and these 4 burly lady firefighters came in. And I was standing back at the back of the gallery, and one of them said, "Is David McCann here?" And it just carried through. And everybody it was like a very commanding voice. Almost as he's back there. And they just literally raced up to me, and all 4 of them gave me a hug at one time. "We can't thank you for helping." The money went to the families of the firefighters that were on, and it came right away with no conditions attached. And we just came to say thank you. And that was years later. So you don't know the lives that you touch, and it so enriches your own life.
So I'm going to ask a number of other questions, David, because so I know you're not a billionaire, right? And so there's, when someone says, so what difference could one person make? I think it's a really great demonstration of what you've done, but it hasn't been because you've been unbelievably wealthy. It's come from like a desire to serve others. Is that fair?
I make about $250,000 a year in salary and investments.
Uh-huh.
I probably give on average $300,000 away a year. I'm drawing down my savings. I'm 78 years old the end of this month. And I basically when I leave, I'm hoping that as I pass, I will smile, remembering the number of people who smiled as I help. I'm not in it for the money. Money's a nice thing, but it's what you do with it that makes a difference. I don't need to drive a Porsche or a Rolls Royce. I don't need to have a fancy house and look great. I live quite well. I've got a close circle of friends that I treasure. But I also look at it and say, my partner's grandmother passed away at the tender age of 111.
Wow.
And the last conversation I had with her was when she said, do you know what the word enough means? She basically told me, she said, when you have at some point in time, you have to sit down and say, when do I have enough? When do I not need any more? When do you have enough stuff? When do you have enough? And I realized that what I don't have enough is people in my life that I'll treasure, memories that I care. And that's when I decided to just to really focus on doing this. And it's an incredibly rich life. You know, you walk down the street and people say hi and okay, who is that? And they say, thanks for helping. Oh, gee. I can't remember how many people I have, but it's
So, so I guess a comment and a question. And one of the comments is that, some people don't feel they're able to give to others until they have enough. And I think that's such a trap to get into because, you can always feel that fear of I don't have enough. And there's no point in waiting until you have enough to do some of those small acts. And
right.
you talked about the ripples and, some of the things that you talked about have huge ripples, but, you can throw a boulder into a lake and it makes huge ripples. And you can throw a pebble into a lake and that too makes ripples. So maybe we could just chat a little bit about what are the small things that someone could do that don't cost anything financially, but can actually make a difference in people's lives. Like, let's see if we can come up with 100 in 2 minutes.
I'll
Okay.
give you a really quick one, and this is really current. I had a friend, Ukrainian refugee, young man, 25 years of age, got out just before the Russians invaded Ukraine, came here, had virtually everything in a suitcase. Known him for almost 2 years. He went into work one day. He got a job working for a company in North Vancouver. And one day he went into work and the owners had decided they fired the entire marketing department, including him. And I bumped into him and he said, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he was just shaking. I mean, it really hit him hard. And I said, look, you were thinking of going to Vancouver Film School, part-time if you save some money a couple years from now. Why don't I make a phone call and see if you can get in full-time, maybe next September or your January? So I made one phone call to one friend that I knew. And I said, what do you know about this? He said, I'm making a phone call. So he called me back half an hour later and he said, he can start either in May or he can start in July or June, end of June, 24th of June. And he said, the school will help with financing. Can you? He's now in the second week of school. I've got a picture of him that he took at the end of the first week. They go 6-7 days a week. Crazy. He has a smile, David, that will melt the Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica. It's just, and I've talked to him a couple times, he's just over the moon. One phone call. That's all it took to change somebody's life. Be forever. It's a fabulous school. It doesn't take much sometimes to change someone.
So let me go one step beyond that, which is these are all small steps. You make it sound so easy. So what are some of the barriers? What are some of the barriers? Yeah, it's easy, but what are some of the things that people tell themselves that keep them from doing those small steps? What gets in the way of that? It is easy, but people don't do it. So what gets in the way?
I think what gets in the way is you think it won't make any difference. But imagine if you got 7 of your friends together and you each decided that you would spend $7 a week buying a kid a meal. So 7 friends. Maybe you've got your mother and your father, your husband, your wife, 2 kids, and a friend. That's $49 a week. And you gave that to a Loving Spoonful or the Vancouver School Board, condition that be used to buy a student a meal every day of the week. $7, well-balanced meal. That might be the only meal that kid gets. And you made that commitment to do it for the entire year. For an entire year, that kid's going to go to school not hungry, going to sit in that classroom, be able to take full advantage of it. At the end of the school year, you might graduate with 75 or 80% grade average instead of failing.
But David,
$7 a week.
I'm going to push back.
6 of your friends.
I'm going to push back. I'm going to push back on this because those things are easy. My question is, why don't people do it? And it's not because it isn't easy. What gets in their way from their willingness to do that? What do they have to overcome to be willing to drop these pebbles in of these random acts of kindness?
I can't figure that one out. I mean, I did Seton Manor when someone gave me literally a tractor, 27 pallet loads of art. You take out of a box, you hang it on the wall. The stuff you buy at the Brick or Mayfair or whatnot. And we did all of the walls. And when we were finished, I was meeting with the executive director, and they had a member of the board that I'd not met before. And she asked me, she said, "Why do you do this? I don't understand why you do this." She'd been away on vacation or business, whatever. And I said, "Look at the smiles on people's faces. That's why you do it. It just makes it." But I understand why you do it. And there really isn't an answer to that. I mean, here's somebody that should have just said, "Thank you." You would think sitting on the board of directors, they're not stupid. And you get such a stupid darn question. And some people just don't get it. And I don't know how you get them to understand it.
Well,
But it's for me, it's just, I mean, I'm not saying I didn't help people before I came out here, but it's become a real organized thing for me. But I'm amazed the number of people volunteer to help that just get it. I saw what you did over here. I want to help you do it over there.
so I'm going to jump in on this because I think there's a number of reasons why people don't. And this is my opinion, but one is that people are a lot of it's rooted in fear, and this could be fear about what if I do something for someone else and they reject it? What if and because sometimes we've had a bad experience. Hold the door open for someone, and the response is, "What's the matter? Don't you think I could do it myself?" And so you get that pushback, or when you're offering something, some food to someone who's on the street. Oh, it's going to set up an expectation. Like we do all this stuff that the fear that keeps us from overcoming a little bit of discomfort to actually take some of those steps. And if, one time it doesn't work, well, maybe the other 10 it will. So I think fear is a big part of it. I think discomfort or, hey, it's not my job. That's what I think gets in the way sometimes.
Well, someone asked me one time, they were saying, you gave somebody 10 or $15 or whatever, they're going to go and buy drugs. It might be outside McDonald's or wherever. And I said, it's irrelevant to me what they spend it on. For me, what's important is doing the act and encouraging them, here, go and buy something to eat or a drink. And I said, if they don't do it, that in no way should impact my desire to help. And yes, it's a fear, and yes, it's real that they could go and do that. But I look at it in most cases and saying, I think 90% of them will walk into McDonald's and buy a meal order. And that's all it really takes. And how the other person reacts, maybe that first time that it happens to them, they'll have that reaction. And maybe the second time they'll start and they'll look at it. I've said to some people that have made comments like that, maybe you just have to do a little kindness yourself and you realize why I did it. And it's an educational opportunity. It has stopped some people, the woman I was just talking about, she stopped. And I said, my mother spent 8 years with Alzheimer's in an institution. I saw people care for her. This is a way of saying thank you in a way. And I said, you're on the board of directors and you've got a 19-story building with hundreds of residents in it. What's best for them? And if somebody decides to do it for monetary purposes, or they want to get recognition, or they want to do, who cares? What's the impact on the community that you're helping or the individual?
Well, that's why I think that one of the things that's important is the best ones are the ones that are unconditional, just like you described. Once you put a condition on it, is it actually an act of kindness or giving, or is it quid pro quo? I think which gets in the way as well. So, David, we could go on for hours. I've heard many of your stories, and I'm so glad we've had an opportunity to have this. But if I was to say what one sentence word of advice would you give to people in the context of providing random acts of kindness? What would that one sentence be that anyone could take away with them and start thinking about what they could do? I realize that's a lot of pressure, but
if you start doing this as a habit, you will find, as I have discovered, that it incredibly enriches your life and the lives of your around you. The people that know you will start to look at you in a different light. And I just can't tell you how it makes me feel. It's a wonderful feeling.
so here's my challenge to those that are listening. try it. Like, just try it and see what happens. And David, I so appreciate everything you've done for our local community and international communities. And I particularly appreciate you taking the time to be with me here today. So, David McCann, thank you so very much. Subscribe now, because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.